A lot to talk about with this year's tight end landscape, and so let's try to dive through it and rank these tight ends for your 2025 fantasy football drafts. Do us a huge favor. If you play fantasy football, hit subscribe. We're going to be releasing high quality content for you here, not only in this offseason, but as we get closer to August and in season as well. So make sure you're subscribed. Drop a like if you would. It's free. It's easy. It takes you 0 seconds and it helps us out so much. We appreciate that. Let's get into the tight end rankings here. Let's start with the S tier. Really, there are 2 guys I think that are deserving of being in this tier, and I think you would agree. One of them is getting his flowers, really getting his flowers, and that's Brock Bowers. And that rhymed, and I didn't mean for it to, but Bowers was nothing short of incredible last year in his rookie year. From a points per game perspective, he was actually 3rd in points per game, 15.5 points per game, 153 targets, 112 receptions. These are high-end receiver numbers, right? 1,200 yards and 5 touchdowns. When you're looking at all of his metrics, I mean, he was 1st in receiving yards, he was 1st in receptions, he was 1st in yak, he was 4th in unrealized air yards, he was 4th in snap share, he was 1st in targets, he was 2nd in target share, he was 1st in routes run. Elite all around. Every step of the way, he had an elite rookie season, and he was, obviously we expect him to build on his rookie season. Trey McBride, a little bit more under the radar in the sense that he doesn't tend to get the love that Bowers does, but he should, because on a points per game standpoint, he only missed 1 game last year, and he averaged 15.6 points per game. So he averaged the same amount of points per game as Brock Bowers did. 147 targets. That's like 6 less than Bowers, right? 111 receptions. That's the same as Bowers. 1,100 receiving yards. You're talking about the same as Bowers here. Had less touchdowns, but touchdowns are super volatile. And so with McBride, I mean, 2nd in targets, 1st in target share, 5th in routes run, 1st in air yards share, 2nd in air yards, 2nd in receptions, 2nd in receiving yards, 3rd in yaks, 8th in unrealized air yards. I mean, him and Bowers are pretty much neck and neck. If I'm drafting an elite tight end in fantasy football this year, I will take whichever one of these guys goes later, and it's going to be McBride. So honestly, as much as I love Brock Bowers, if I can get McBride around later, I think there's a pretty good analytical argument to do it. I will say this. McBride was in a much better situation last year than Bowers. Bowers' situation got a lot better with Geno Smith, but you do add a Jack Besh in that offense. Obviously playing with Jacoby Myers already. You also add Ashton Genty, and that could change the calculus of things. Not to mention Pete Carroll's offense tend to be a little bit more run heavy, but it is still a better situation for Bowers, and so you could make that argument if you really want to rank him above McBride. I think both these guys are in the same tier. Nathan agrees with me. I think that you should take whichever one's cheapest this year.
So top of the A tier, we're not going to do anything cute here. That'll kind of be for the B tier, but with Kittle being at the top here, I mean, he's the one guy in this tier where you could make a solid argument to put him in the S tier with Bowers and McBride. In fact, let's just put him in a tier of his own. The dude was number 1 among tight ends in points per game last season. Number 1. Now the reason he's not in the S tier with Bowers and McBride is historically Kittle does miss a little bit of time. And I don't want to be the guy that's like, oh, well, don't draft Kittle because he's going to miss 2 games.
Which is what he misses. He misses 2 to 3 games a year.
2 to 3 games every single year. And if I were to bet again this season, I'd say he probably misses a couple games. It's so worth it at this price. Go get a backup tight end for the 2 weeks that he's banged up because he beats the crap out of defensive linemen when he's blocking. He's the best all-around tight end in the league, and as a receiver, he doesn't even require a ridiculous amount of target volume, and I think that's what makes him so effective as an investment, and what makes him so safe is you're not worried about any additional offensive assets that they bring into that situation. You're not worried about CMC coming back healthy. You're not worried about what Pearsall might do from a fantasy perspective this year. You're not worried if Jennings will take another step up. You're not worried if Brandon Ayuk will come back healthier than we expect to start the season. Because you just know that with 110 targets, 80 targets, 90 targets, George Kittle's going to get you 14, 15 points per game. And at 15.8 points per game last season with 1,100 receiving yards, 8 receiving touchdowns across the board, this guy was unstoppable, unbelievable. He's absolutely deserving to be in the tier of his own. I'll just pick up LaPorta and Hawk in our new B tier. We got LaPorta, who really was disappointing last season compared to where he was being drafted at price. All that to say, he still finished as the tight end 8, which again isn't saying anything crazy. But when you look at the splits, I want you to look at the splits here, because there was a drastic difference between what the first half of the season looked like compared to the second half. And you really want to look at that consistency towards the end of the season. And I think that's something that you're going to probably get more this season, and more inconsistency with Jameson Williams, with Ben Johnson leaving. But, I mean, look at the beginning, 8, 3, 5, 9, 12, 3, 16, 4, 15. Throughout that course, weeks 1 through 10, he only had 3 touchdowns, and then he scored 4, 15, 10, 18, 14, 18, and 13 points. Weeks 12 through 18, which was good for a lot of points and a number of touchdowns. I think 4 touchdowns. So he ended up on the season with like 7 touchdowns, 3 less than he had in 2023. There was some hints of regression looking at his rookie season and where his production came from compared to his second year. And we kind of didn't take those indicators because we're like, he was a rookie tight end. He already exceeded expectations. Who's to say that he won't exceed expectations again in his second season? He didn't. This year, I think he's going to come back and probably solidify himself truly as a top 6 tight end pretty comfortably. One of the things that's really important to note here is Jameson Williams kind of had a career season last year, and was utilized in a way where they were taking a lot of shots downfield, and he kind of just executed on those. And at the end of the day, even though Jameson Williams and Sam LaPorta don't play the same position, lo and behold, they do take away from each other, because volume is volume, right? I don't care if it's a shot downfield or a shot across the middle of the field to Jamo versus LaPorta. They're completely different assets. They do impact one another because they are the third and fourth options in that offense. It's Jahmyr Gibbs and Amon-Ra St. Brown, and then it's LaPorta and Jamo. So I will say, with us ranking LaPorta where we have him, I think we're kind of calling our shot and saying, hey, Jameson Williams might take a little bit of a step back this season with Ben Johnson no longer being the OC.
This is actually relevant to all the videos we've been recording today. We're recording a little bit early because Nathan's going on vacation. But today, did you see that Frank Ragnow retired, their center?
I did see that.
That's actually a big deal.
That is a big deal.
Like, that's a bigger deal, I think, than we're making out to be. Yep. In terms of run blocking, he was like the highest graded run blocking center on PFF last year.
Yes.
But also, they've lost now, 2 offensive linemen. That's going to be for an offense, you also got a new offensive scheme in there.
Yeah.
I mean, you need time to throw it down the field to Jamo. You
absolutely.
The quick hitter there would be Sam LaPorta.
Yes.
When you're looking at LaPorta also, I want
That's
to add this
great point.
to kind of, even further solidify what you were saying here. Targets per route, he was 13%, and then a target percentage, he was 12% weeks 1 through 9 last year. When you're looking at weeks 10 through the end of the season, those both went up to 20%. And so you saw a pretty big jump, and that's pretty much where he was in 2023 as well. So he kind of was the same guy he was in 2023, at least for the last 8 to 10 weeks of the season, including the playoffs. And so
he definitely has a better chance at returning on investment this season in fantasy compared to last year, because he was just being drafted way too high. You're going to get him at a fraction of the price this year.
I agree.
And then TJ Hockenson going to be in the same tier here. Hawk's kind of looking at a same sort of the same sort of situation as LaPorta, where you've got a crowded offense, right? Hawk has to deal with the best wide receiver in the league, Justin Jefferson, and then Jordan Addison, who kind of just gets his own in terms of touchdown production every single year. And then you take into account that running back room where Aaron Jones is still there and he's still productive. And then they bring in Jordan Mason as well, which is a little bit of an interesting signing. J.J. McCarthy then is the other question mark, right? J.J. McCarthy is going to get his first opportunity, his first crack at being a starting quarterback in the NFL. We'll see what he can do and if he can match what Darnold was able to do last season. I think with the volume opportunity, nothing is really going to change there offensively. Hockenson, though, I don't know what expectations a lot of people have for Hockenson last year, coming off of a pretty significant ACL injury in 2023. But, he kind of met my expectations. His target volume was a little bit hit or miss. He went 4, 9, 3, 9, 6, 5, 7, 5, 6, 8 targets when he came back healthy. But, pretty much right when he came back, they were integrating him into that offensive rotation relatively consistently. And this season, 62 targets in 9 games, 41 receptions, 455 yards, 0 touchdowns. That's the kicker there. We need that touchdown rate to go up, because even though he came back healthy and was getting all that target volume and yardage and usage, there wasn't a ton of opportunity in the red zone. Some of those opportunities were going to those run-blocking tight ends like Johnny Munt, who I don't think is in the picture anymore, but Josh Oliver is still there. So, look, this is one where I think the Hawk is definitely deserving of being in the same tier as Sam LaPorta. It might be a little riskier just because that offense is a little riskier. But I will say, I think his upside is definitely just as high as LaPorta's is.
All right, dropping down to the next tier here. We'll start with Travis Kelce. Kelce, compared to where he's being drafted last year, yeah, he wasn't a very good return on investment. But when you're looking at, what he did compared to, some of his other years, it's not the years, it's not 2020, it's not 2022 where he had over 300 PPR points. It's more like, 2023 is when he had 219, he had 195 last year. And so you've seen kind of a steady decline from Travis Kelce. But even in his decline, he is the tight end 5. Tight end 5 overall last year in PPR leagues. When you're looking at his utilization as well, still a 24% target share for Travis Kelce in that offense. And part of the reason that it's declined, even though his target share has maintained, is because they're just throwing the ball less. That's just the Chiefs offense now. And so the one thing about Travis Kelce is compared to some of the other guys in this tier, he has stayed on the field and runs more routes than most of the guys in this tier. Talking about Jonnu Smith especially, even though Jonnu was from a production standpoint last year, somebody that really kind of came out of nowhere and surprised us all. He was the tight end 4 last year, so he finished ahead of Kelce on a points basis. He was much more efficient than Kelce with his opportunity because he actually ran significantly less routes than Travis Kelce. He only ran 68% of his team's total routes. But Jonnu is somebody that going into this year, I really don't see a reason to short him. I mean, he came out last year and was consistent. He had a ton of upside. He was outscoring Jalen Waddle by a long shot. He was out targeting Jalen Waddle. And so I don't think there's any reason this year to think that it's going to be different with Jonnu. It's just one of those later career, I get why you'd be skeptical with him though, is what I want to say. Because it's Jonnu Smith. Like it's not, right. You don't feel as comfortable with Jonnu Smith as you do some of the other guys.
Well, you're in contrast to Kelce and where he was going at price last season, you're getting Jonnu at a more expensive price than where you got him previously. And the return on investment there isn't going to be as high this year, objectively.
Yeah, I was going to say the reason Jonnu was a league winner is because he was he was a waiver pickup essentially.
Yeah.
Let's get a rookie in this tier, Tyler Warren. There are a couple things to consider with Tyler Warren here. Yes, I do think he's probably the most ready and comes into the situation that is most conducive to fantasy production in year one, just because there really isn't like a dominant target guy there. From a targets per route run standpoint, Josh Downs dominates that offense. But Tyler Warren, they brought him in essentially because they don't have an alpha. But the other thing about Tyler Warren, and we've heard a lot of people say this, including Rob Gronkowski, and I think Gronk is right when he says this, Tyler Warren's not like a Brett Bowers 10, 11 targets per game guy. They're definitely going to give Warren dedicated targets, especially, I think they're going to try to get him out in the flat a lot, but I don't think he's probably going to get more than like 6-7 targets a game. I think they're going to use him like, bulldozer type tight end. He's not like a high target type of tight end, but that doesn't mean he's not going to be productive, because you look at Kittle isn't necessarily a high target tight end compared to Bowers, compared to McBride.
He just makes the most
but he just makes the most out of all. And I think that's closer to how the Colts would use Warren. But there's a ton of opportunity for Warren. When you spend that high of a draft pick on him, they're essentially betting on his talent, and they're going to use him. They're going to funnel a lot of their offense through him. And so I think he's worth taking a shot. He's a wild card, but he dominated in college. I mean, he dominated at Penn State.
He's as versatile as Bowers. He's just not as athletic. So we'll see what that ends up turning into.
And so with Warren, it's a rookie, so it's risky. But let's talk about Mark Andrews. Andrews last year, obviously, week 1, people dropped their entire free agent budget on Isaiah Likely because, he had 30-something points, and it's like, okay. In reality, when you're looking at Andrews, targets per route run last year was 20%. In the first 4 weeks, that was 11%, and so the year ended up being a lot better. Yep. The target share total went from in the first 4 weeks it was 9% overall. In the season, he ended up having a 16% target share, and so it got better as the season went on. It was solid closer to the end of the season.
Really reliable.
Yeah, he was solid at the end of the season. So let's not forget that. I don't see any reason to think that. Two things. Number one, I have no reason to believe that Likely won't come out this year and make a conversation. He will. He's going to do that every year. That's who Isaiah Likely is, and he's very streaky as a tight end and from a production standpoint in fantasy. So I do think he makes it a conversation. Andrews has been the reliable guy, though, and I don't think that changes this year. Evan Ingram goes to Denver. Last year, from an opportunity standpoint, when you're looking at all the guys in this tier, from a targets per route run standpoint and a target share standpoint, he actually had the highest 2 marks in those categories of everybody in that tier. 26% of targets on his routes run, and then his target share was 25%. And so very high marks for Evan Ingram, obviously going to a completely new situation, but a situation where you go from Trevor Lawrence to Bo Nix. I would say that's probably a lateral move. Just, without getting too much into the weeds there, it's not that big of an upgrade or downgrade either way. And he goes to an offense, though, where, they've pretty much only got Courtland Sutton. I think Ingram could get a ton of targets there this year. In fact, I think they use Ingram more like a wide receiver than they do a tight end this year.
He's always been utilized like a wide receiver more than
and he's wearing he's wearing number 1. Yeah. He's a wide receiver for pretty much.
Evan Ingram is a slot wide receiver.
He's pretty much exactly what he is. And so at that point, I think that makes him a pretty interesting pick in fantasy football leagues. Now, even with those marks last year, he's still only 9.9 PPR points per game. You obviously would have liked to see that higher, but I think he's an interesting pick this year. He could be a wild card. And then the last guy on this list, David Njoku, and probably the most reliable guy on this list in the last couple of years in the sense that he's had some really good back-to-back years now. 13 points per game last year in PPR leagues and finished as he was a top 12 tight end last year, but he only played in 11 games. The year before that, he was a top 6 tight end. He was the tight end 6 on the year. But when you're looking at his efficiency metrics and per game metrics, he was 4th in points per game last year in 11 games, 13.5 points per game, like I mentioned. He did have 5 touchdowns and 500 yards in those 11 games that he played. And again, top 5 in most target stats, 6th in targets, 5th in target share. And then when you're looking at, his efficiency, actually, from a yards per route run standpoint, he was 26th in the league. So kind of a mixed bag here. Unrealized air yards was high. Obviously not a huge yak guy, but we know that, right? He was 10th in receptions. And so really targets and receptions was what kind of propped David Njoku up in what was a pretty shaky situation, honestly. Like the situation was not good there, but it's not any better this year. So you need to keep that in mind. I'm not worried about Harold Fannin. By the way, I did want to say that. I think Harold Fannin is great. I think he could be somebody in the NFL, but right now I think Njoku has that job on lock.
So we got another one-player tier in the D tier here. Colson Loveland, he's going to be someone that I think ultimately no one's really going to figure out until we just see how that receiving room kind of unfolds throughout the season this year in Chicago. And with Loveland, I mean, he was a guy that was a top 10 NFL draft pick, drafted higher than Tyler Warren, and just went to a landing spot that legitimately no one really expected, especially with the Luther Burden pick then in the second round as well. I mean, guys, we can play the imagination game all we want and say, oh, DJ Moore is going to score a ton of points. Oh, Dunze is going to score a ton of points. Luther Burden, we loved him as a prospect. He's going to score a ton of points. And Loveland, love him. He's going to score a ton of points. That's 4 guys. In a Ben Johnson offense, he can absolutely do it. What conversation did we just have? LaPorta versus Jamison Williams because of Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jahmyr Gibbs in the receiving game. And, I mean, you've got 4 weapons there in the receiving game. You've got 4 weapons here in the receiving game that are going to have to duke it out. And in terms of that receiving or target volume hierarchy, you're probably looking at Odunze and Moore up top, and then Burden or Loveland trying to figure it out. And, again, I understand they don't play the same role offensively. The targets have to go somewhere. Okay, I don't care about where the targets are in the field. They have to choose who to get the ball to. Because they're probably not going to throw it 45 times a game to get each one of these guys 8 targets per game plus some obscure ones to backups and commit. And I'm sure one of the counterpoints here would be, well, in contrast to the Lions, who have Gibbs and Monty, the Bears have Swift and Roschon, so they're not going to run the ball as much as they did in Detroit. I mean, yeah, you have a point there. That's fair. They're not going to run the ball as effectively as they did in Detroit, but I wouldn't put it past Ben Johnson to want to run the ball. I mean, he kind of establishes the Lions offense by running the ball quite a bit. So even though he doesn't have the talent of Gibbs and Monty in Chicago's offense, I think Swift and Roschon are going to get a decent amount of workload. We'll see what ends up happening here. But regardless, I mean, you have to give Loveland his flowers somewhat, which is why we rank him as a top 12 tight end and above some of the guys who produced as top 10 tight ends just last season in Ertz and Freiermuth at the top of the F tier. So I'll just skim through these guys here. Zach Ertz finished, he had a great season last year. He was the tight end 7. I mean, talk about a kind of a resurrection season for Zach Ertz in his career. 34 years old. As a 33-year-old tight end last season, 91 targets, 66 receptions, 657 or 54 yards, and 7 touchdowns. Nothing really about that wide receiver room has changed outside of Deebo Samuel, who's going to be probably more of a gadget guy at his current age. I think Deebo will definitely be an interesting pick this year in fantasy. A little bit risky, but Ertz, I mean, is probably going to maintain a decent amount of his opportunity, maybe not match it, but he has a good shot at being a top 12 tight end again this season. Pat Freiermuth is just so steady every single year. He has a very, very capped ceiling. But again, he'll get you 10 to 15 points any given week. He'll have some down weeks as well. Not a ton of target volume consistently week in and week out, but I mean, as a tight end 9 last season, he's been the tight end 8 in 2022. He had an injury in 2023, so he was less productive there. He's been pretty reliable when you have to plug him in. And then Kraft and Kincaid are just developmental tight ends that we really thought Kincaid was going to come on last year. He ended up being one of the most disappointing picks in 2024. He only had 3 double-digit games last season, 2 total touchdowns, not a ton of usage in the red zone, less targets than he did as a rookie in 2023. And I get he missed some time. I know he was injured, banged up for a lot of the season. Guys, he was an objective disappointment last year, even being injured and at 85% health. He should have taken over that receiver room and gotten a ridiculous amount of targets because no one else was there. Absolutely no one. There was no excuse. So you do have to count on Kincaid this season. You'll get him at a much cheaper price. So if you want to take a shot on him this year, I think it's a lot more reasonable than where he was going and being priced last year. And we advocated for it last season. So we were wrong there. Tucker Kraft I already mentioned, but how much is he going to be able to do in an offense where they've really found their identity running the ball, and Josh Jacobs and found some success there? I don't know. He's shown some good flashes as well, though. So we'll see. Jake Ferguson, kind of similar to Freiermuth, just in an offense where they don't really feature the tight end consistently, but Ferguson can have some good weeks. Pickens, I do think, kind of impacts what Ferguson's upside could really be in that offense. And I think at this point, we've just been waiting for Ferguson to break out and have an elite tight end season, and it hasn't really come along. He's more of a bridge guy that you probably want to plug in during a week, or if you fade tight end, you just start him, and you just know you're only going to get probably 10 points from the tight end position. Hunter Henry had a good season last year. We'll see how he looks in a new offense under Mike Vrabel. Dallas Goedert just needs to stay healthy. And even when he is healthy, he kind of leeches off of the injuries that happened here and there in Philly's offense with A.J. Brown missing a couple weeks here, Devonta Smith missing a couple weeks here, but then you're just hoping that he's healthy at that time when those guys are out of that offense. He has very streaky weeks. He had like a 30-plus point game last season. Because some of those guys were out, he's not super reliable and consistent. Kyle Pitts, we'll see what he can do this year in a Michael Penix offense where they pass the ball quite a bit. He's kind of a sneaky pick this season because, again, similar to some of the other guys in this tier, high expectations in the past. People are going to have way lower expectations for him this season, where you could get him at a pretty nice price if you fade tight end, take a Kyle Pitts shot, and see if he can actually, show that he wants to play football and catch the ball.
I don't believe it.
Which Avery doesn't believe. I don't really believe. But again, if you want to be optimistic, I can't blame you for it. He still is talented, and that offense is built to pass the ball consistently.
I think the most logical thing to do after drafting Kyle Pitts year after year only for him to suck is just draft him again. You could just draft him again. Why not?
Well, you could, yeah.
Why? I mean, he's only failed you, 4 times now?
Yep, and it's all about the price. So
it is
just, yeah.
Now you can get him much cheaper and he'll fail you. Let's go to the G. Yep. Actually, let's just talk about these last 2 tiers very quickly. This last year, the G tier, mostly a couple of rookies in here, in Terrence Ferguson and Mason Taylor. I'm super high on Ferguson, by the way. I think he's the tight end there. I think Terrence Ferguson could be a tight end 1 this year.
I think Terrence Ferguson could outproduce Colson Loveland this year.
He absolutely could.
There's more opportunity too,
and that's a huge part of it. He's not better than Loveland by any means, by any stretch of the imagination. But a lot of times, I mean, look, Jonnu's not better than most of the guys on these lists, but he's got the opportunity share, right? So Ferguson, and then Mason Taylor. Kmet did have a good season with Fields in Chicago, so that's worth noting. I'm not super high on Mason Taylor as a prospect, but I mean, there's nobody else there, so the opportunity, he's got it. Brenton Strange is essentially a rookie just because this will be the first season where he's actually like the tight end 1 there. And he effectively is. I mean, he's played in 17 and 14 games in the first couple of years of his career, but he's never been a top 30 tight end. And so from a snap share percentage, he's never really been the guy there. I'm not super convinced when he is the guy there, he will be super productive, but it's definitely worth monitoring. He's going to be the starting tight end there, and that's really what this tier is.
Yeah, he had a couple of good weeks last year with like 112 target game against the Jets in week 15. You remember that game?
Yeah. And he had 82% snap share in that game. And so he could be interesting. Juwan Johnson, he was a hit at times last year, sometimes missed, but that situation's so rocky. I really just don't want to buy into that offense this year, to be honest with you. Isaiah Likely, we already talked about. Look, Isaiah Likely's going to have some good weeks. He's probably going to start the year on waivers. You don't want him as your tight end 1, but don't expect him to be the consistent week in, week out guy. In fact, even Andrews is likely is good enough to make Andrews a shaky week in, week out start. Andrews is not the sure thing that he would be without Likely. He's just not. So Likely's great, but the fact of the matter is, each time we've gotten to this point with Likely and Andrews and we've needed consistency out of one of them, which is really important from the tight end spot in fantasy football, it's always been Andrews. And so Likely, well, again, he'll probably be relevant, but not going to be relevant enough to start every week, I don't think, unless something happens to Andrews, which is why he's a decent stash or waiver level guy in fantasy football, just in case something happens, because then he is a tight end 1 in fantasy football. Let's make no mistake about that. Last year here, Taysom Hill, it's Taysom Hill. I mean, the jack of all trades, the wild card, and who knows what position he plays for them this year. He could do all of them, actually. Mike Gesicki, he had some good moments last year as well. He is the starting tight end in an offense that passes it a million times a game, and so you have to pay attention for that reason. Dalton Schultz, Cade Otton, some guys that have been in the league a couple of years, but we haven't really, with Schultz obviously had some good years with the Cowboys, but there wasn't really enough to go around last year in Houston. To be honest with you, I mean, unless I'm mistaken, he was a low-end tight end too, right? Tight end 20. Yeah. So, I mean, he was a tight end 1 the 2 years before that, but he's always been a low end tight end 1, which really isn't saying anything. I don't have high expectations for Dalton Schultz this year by any stretch of the imagination. And then Cade Otton. And Cade Otton, playing in an offense where you had a top 5 QB from a fantasy perspective, he's never been a tight end 1. And so really not any reason, I don't think, to get crazy about any of these tight ends. So, again, tight end, it can be a crapshoot, especially after, honestly, with tight ends in fantasy football, it's pretty much, do you have an elite one or don't you? That's really what it is. And so, hopefully, I think the addition this year of Warren and Loveland, not to mention some of the other promising rookies, because to be honest with you, this rookie class had some fairly good tight ends in it. I think it could make the tight end landscape stronger, but we do have to be careful about what price we're drafting our tight ends at, and hopefully this list helps you kind of find the discrepancies in price between some of them. So make sure, again, if you play fantasy football, drop a like. It's free, it's easy, it helps us out a ton, and subscribe. We promise we'll bring you the highest quality content we possibly can, trying to grow the channel, trying to make high quality content, so we appreciate you guys supporting us. But thank you so much for watching, and we'll catch you guys later.